Hello, good evening. Sorry for the late start. I forgot to do the pictures with the captions. This is the War Room, and I've made a few changes, as you probably noticed. The War Room is now officially in its own playlist on my channel because we have a lot of episodes to cover. Today is day 13 of Russia's illegal incursion into the Ukraine. And I have updated the casualty figures in the scroller below. We do have a lot to cover. A lot to cover. So, that being said, I think I have a full panel. I'm just going to start dragging everybody in. I'm not sure if they're all wanting to be in, so if they drop out, just don't be surprised. It's a thing. You may notice that the map on the splash screen today says March 7th. That's because it's the updated battle map from the day before's outcomes, I guess is a good way to put it. So yes, it is. Today is March 8th. It's just this morning's battle map was from yesterday's intel. So if you compare this map to yesterday's, the territories that are occupied and the battle marks are probably in slightly different places as the Russian army starts to advance or as the Ukrainian military starts to push back. And before we start with like the chat and the show today, I wanted to address something that I was asked yesterday that I didn't really have a good answer to until after the show, and in hindsight I gave it some thought and I thought, that deserves a better answer. So, towards the end of the show, one of my one of my newer panelists who started to arrive is somebody that I was hoping to have from the beginning, which was Squibload. Um, I've known him now for several years, and he lives where my dad came from, and we live on opposite ends of the country. But, I mean, we obviously respect each other's opinions, and we sort of align pretty well. Every once in a while, like, we don't disagree, we don't agree, but I mean, we're not at each other's throats or anything. Um, but he had asked me the question yesterday. He goes, "What is my fascination with this conflict? And what is my fascination with Ukraine in general?" And to be perfectly honest, I don't have any personal vested interest in that country. I don't. But what I do have a fascination with is history. And I was never really an apt student of it when I was growing up. But as I got older, I took a fascination into obviously firearms. For those of you who know my firearms reviews and my This Old Gad episodes. So when I got into the restoration of military surplus rifles, I got engrossed into the history of either the countries or the conflicts or the weapon itself. So, like CN Arsenal is a very good source for specific information for certain firearms because they're they started off in a lane of World War One, and as their channel grew over time, and as they were able to finish, I guess, the inventory of the conflict, um, obviously people like what he does, Othias and May. So um, they branched out past that, which is nice. So anyway, it's not it's not that I don't have interest in the country, but I do have interest in history. I do have an interest in warfare and global conflict, and I guess like the intricacies of geopolitics. So I do this mainly because I feel like 20 years from now, this is going to be in the history books. And someday, like if you're my age, most of you already have kids. But say 10 years from now, your kid comes up to you with a history book and he says, "I've got this homework. What can you tell me about this?" And, you know, you'll look back at it and go, "Oh yeah, well, 10 years ago, yeah, I would say, well, I was doing podcasts on this because I covered it every single day because I thought it was important, not only to just me, but to everybody, because this isn't something that happens every day. And depending on how far this is going to go, um, this could be huge, right? But I guess one of the other things I see in this is you have a leader who is a Cold War relic, essentially, and he's very Old Testament because of he's set in his ways. But he is the leader of a nation where a large part of his population were born after the fall of the Soviet Union. So they don't know communism. They don't know socialism. They don't know the Iron Curtain. They don't know the Cold War. They know what they were taught in history books, but they didn't live it. All they know is Starbucks, McDonald's, the capitalist Kool-Aid, right? The ability to travel freely across the country, um, iPhones, all sorts of things like that. That's all they ever knew. So you've got this leader who's trying to drag his country back into the 1960s, and he's got a giant part of his population saying, "Shut up, you old man. We don't want that." And he's beating them in public and arresting them and disappearing them. And he was like, he's just hell bent on legacy building before he keels over. Just a Cold War relic that just won't go away. But I think that if this conflict plays out to its entirety, whether it's just a small regional thing or if it actually ends up being the thing that everyone's too afraid to call it, he'll be the last of his kind. I mean, the guy who would probably take over the country is the guy that's currently sitting in political prison, who is a diehard capitalist. Like, he doesn't want the Soviet Union either. That guy's Navalny. And I think that this may be the last time that Russia's ever seen as an adversary of communism or socialism. Like, this can be put down once and for all, which would be mega in history, that is. And then the only one you got to worry about after that is Xi Jinping in China. But if you knock out who Ping thought was bigger than he was, he may think twice. And then if that conflict ends with both of them gone, I mean, honestly, how long do you think Venezuela and North Korea are going to hold out without two of the biggest players on the board, right? So this could be like world-altering history, and I find that what if or that possibility pretty fascinating. Maybe you don't, or maybe what I'm saying isn't too believable, but I mean that's just the way I see it. You don't have to agree with it, but I mean, if you're here, you probably find something you agree with. So anyway, we actually do have a lot to cover. I thought that this was going to be a quick episode, but the more I start thinking about it, it's probably not. But I'm going to try to get you all through it. Warsaw's trying to call me in the middle of the show. What the hell? So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and start bringing in the panel, and we will go ahead and start talking about this. So in my usual form, I'm going to pull in my second panelist because my first one's in school right now. And this is Scott P79, handyman, also known as Scottish Naya on the server because I wrote his name in Cyrillics. He's up just north of New England, up in New Hampshire. And he's taken an interest in this, and he's got some nuts and bolts knowledge too of just like the hardware they're using. So we've got him here. So good evening to you.
Evening.
And so am I pulling all of them in? As far as you're aware?
As far as I'm aware.
Okay. So next will be my local, or not my local, but my IT guy, my fellow IT guy, who actually comes to us from, I always get this wrong. I'm going to get it right today. He's near Charleston, South Carolina. And this is Mikhail Nightstritsky, also known as Mike, also known as Nightstrike. And he was gracious enough to have a early and abbreviated hit or miss, which is usually Tuesday nights at 9 o'clock. But since I've been kidnapping him for this show, very graciously he has made some concessions. So good evening to you.
Yep, thanks. I forget how to say good afternoon or good evening in Russian, but we'll get there eventually.
Did something happen to your mic, or do I got to turn you up?
No, nothing happened to Mike, as far as I know.
Okay, I'll just alter your volume a bit.
Huh.
All right, we're good. We're good.
Didn't do anything.
All right, so next is the Polish Hammer.
There. How about that? Is that better?
That's good. Also known as Warsaw Patriot.
Away. That's what it was.
I believe you are out in the Midwest, and you do have some knowledge of the region in question, so I'm sure your perspectives will be very well appreciated here. So good evening to you.
Good evening to you too as well.
All right, so I will be pulling in the other two, whether or not they're gonna, chip in or whatever. But we can have them in here.
Be careful. I'm warning you.
Well, whatever. I mean, Deagle's probably got issues with connections
Legal's
anyway.
fine. It's just FNA sometimes.
Oh, well, we'll see how this goes. So we're gonna have a pretty big panel tonight. Next is Mr. FNH, and last is Desert Eagleton. So we actually do have quite a large panel tonight. Hey, and they all fit on the screen too. That's great. So it's scaled really nice.
There we go.
Yeah, that's pretty
Holy
good.
crap! What's up?
All right, so I have to alter a couple of volumes just because everyone has different gains. So if you see me messing about or stalling for a second, it's just I'm trying to correct it to keep everyone balanced.
Right.
All right, so like I said, we got a lot to cover. This was a pretty big news day, actually. I want to start. Should I? It's probably going to mess up the timeline. Last night, I think it was last night, ABC News did an interview with David Muir and Vladimir Zelensky. And Squib text bombed me while I was at work about his dislike of that interview. He had a very different view from what I heard from others. But one thing that really stood out to me was Zelensky basically said, look, I have no intention of joining NATO. I'm like, what? I thought that's what you wanted, right? So then, like, the theory mill in my head started going off, and I'm like, maybe he's saying that as a concession to de-escalate with Russia because they were saying that you should, if you want us to stop killing your people, don't apply for NATO, right? That was one of their demands. So when he did this interview, he sort of mentioned, he was like, I don't have any more intention to join NATO. Now, granted, most applicants who try to join NATO, from my understanding, it takes up to 10 years to get accepted because they have these sort of interval goals that your nation or your government have to sort of clear hurdles. And if you don't catch these intervals, then you don't get in, right?
Yeah. Right.
So it takes a long time.
It does.
But it was my understanding that because of Ukraine's interesting start and upbringing and how they are literally a thumb in the eye of communism and the risk of them being attacked by the itchy blanket of communism, that some concessions would be made in an emergency session to fast track them in because nothing would piss off Putin more than taking all his Soviet states and putting them under the warm, snuggly blanket of NATO, right? Well, that didn't happen. Much to the surprise of a lot of people, that didn't happen. And today's news, there are bits of today's news that sort of make me think that he said what he said because he really doesn't want to join it anymore because of this experience, leaving a really bad taste in his mouth. Remember how I was like teasing about that whole, oh, you poor people, here, have some thoughts and prayers, maybe a couple of helmets, right? Like shit like that, right? Hearing that so many times and being told, no, you're not getting a no-fly zone, that tends to piss you off. And
let's be honest, wouldn't you be pissed off too?
Yes. And so that's why when I got the texts, from Squib today, he had said something about Zelensky seems pretty nearsighted and he's not talking about any sort of compromise. A good politician can find a compromise. But the thing is he only had one real request. He only the one thing he would have asked for is air cover, right? He could have probably gave up everything else if he had a no-fly zone. He'd be like, "Look, give me air cover, and I can probably make do with everything else, without everything else." But that's the biggest thing to ask because obviously it drags nations that enforce the no-fly zone into the conflict.
Right.
But then on the other side of that is you've got a dick invading your country, telling other countries that if you get involved in their defense, you are a belligerent. while he employs the armies of 3 other countries: Belarus, Chechnya, and now Syria. So it's like he can do it, but Ukraine can't. And the only reason he's getting away with it is because he has nuclear weapons. If this was a conventional war, if Russia didn't have a nuclear weapon, you would imagine that all the little satellite cities on the border to Ukraine on the Russian side would have probably been bombed back into the Stone Age by now.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe even Moscow. Maybe. But because they have a nuke, and if they had a 20 million man army, you could kill all but one Russian, and if that one Russian remaining still had his finger on the button, NATO would still capitulate, because the idea of nuclear war is terrifying to them. And what's really funny is my mentor's a 75-year-old Jewish guy, and even he said sometimes you just got to stop pussyfooting around and take the risk, because if you don't, your bully's just going to keep pushing and run you over. He was like, the threat of nuclear war is always going to be there. Sometimes you just have to call their bluff with a bigger one. And if he actually does use a tactical nuke, at least now you know where he stands. It's kind of surreal. Anyway, let's get into the stories. I just thought that interview was kind of interesting because I got very polarizing opinions of their take on it.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, let's get started. The stories start off where we left off yesterday. But actually, let me go ahead and address the chat because there's a lot of people out there right now. So good evening to the finest of apes and Space Vatnik, Daniel, and let's see. I know I saw somebody else in here earlier. Terry's here. Like, we've got folks here. Chat's coming. It's
Shady
fine,
Hill's out
Warsaw.
there.
It's cool. I know life gets in the way. That's cool. We got a bunch of people. We'll make it.
Shady Hill Homestead's out there too.
He did. Okay. So, hello, chat. Thank you for being here. We are watching the chat. I just might be a little slow on the take because I'm reading off of 3 screens right now.
Yeah, Sean's going over all the information.
Yeah, like I'm just trying to make sure I got everything where it needs to be because we had a late start. So anyway, today's stories pick up actually right where yesterday's show ended, which would have put it into the early hours of day 13, right? So my first story to you comes from 7:46 a.m. Ukrainian time, and which would have been before midnight my time. And it says Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky vowed not to leave Ukraine's capital city of Kyiv, going so far as to reveal his location as Russian forces continue their assault on the city. On Bankova Street, he said on social media. The camera was pointing right at him. The office of the president was right across the street. Big, meaty ones. That's the only way I could describe that. Anyway, he said that he's not hiding, and he's not... Okay, I can do that. He said he's not hiding, and he's not afraid anymore. Because he's got nothing to be afraid of. I took care of it. I did it. Don't worry. I had you down at like 90, and now I got you up to 120, so he should probably be able to hear you now. So, yeah, he's not afraid anymore. Bankova Street is where the presidential offices are located. The Ukrainian leader defiantly pointed his camera out the window from just across the street from his own office, showing that it was nighttime in Kyiv. So the question I had was, yes, he is pulling an Iron Man. He's sitting there just going, I'm Iron Man. But is he prepared to become a martyr for his people? Because it almost seems like he knows that he's not going to get the help he needs, and his death may become more symbolic for whatever he wants. I don't know. It's kind of hard to figure him out right now.
Who are we figuring out?
Zelensky.
Zelensky, okay.
I don't think he's the kind of guy who's going to disappear either. Like, he's not going to retreat. I think he's got too much pride and he's too invested in this now.
I think
That
he's
and
trying to pull like a Tony Montoya right now.
maybe you might be right, but
And
that
no,
might be
I'm
the
not.
thing that his people need to see to keep them going.
Yes.
Because, I mean, if we're led to believe that he's
Got a little friend.
no, if
Oh.
I don't know how I'm trying to describe this.
Do you think this statement by Zelensky may be part of the negotiations that he's been doing with Russia?
No, because he's not personally there at those. They're selling delegations. Both sides are sending delegations.
Okay.
So what ends up happening is each guy's getting a list, and they go and they compare their lists, and obviously they're like, this is a non-starter, this is a non-starter. Maybe we can do this, and then they they convene, or they close out saying, look, we didn't get a whole lot done here. We'll meet in a couple of days. We'll pick a location that we agree upon. We'll go back to our respective leaders and tell them what we discussed and
Right.
if we made any headway, that kind of thing.
Okay.
I don't know. I think that if we're led to believe that they really haven't lost all the aircraft that they said they have, or that they haven't lost, then maybe his defenses are actually far more effective than the world gave him credit for, and maybe he needs to just keep their morale up because they are actually holding up pretty well. I mean, even this battle map here, right? This was updated yesterday based on what these people do is they take the intel from the country in country. They take the intel from
Right.
the journalists on the ground. They probably even listen to Russian state TV, because that way it's sort of like a bell curve. They throw out the highs, they throw out the lows, and everything that sort of fits in the middle of all their sources, they can say that's probably reliable. So they can draw this map, you know? Like if the Russians were like, we took over half the country, and then like the Ukrainians are like, they've taken over 0% of the country, then somewhere in between half and zero is the truth. And then you just start taking all the field commander stories, and then you take all the
I mean,
the like
judging by
journalist
that map,
stories
the
and things like
Russians
that.
only have like a not even they only got a sliver of the country. You know, they don't have a lot of it. They're fighting for it though.
I don't know. I mean, I'm just
assuming that the Russians are taking.
I
a
think
lot
the
heavier
best stories you
casualties
can
than the
get
Ukrainians.
are actually from the people there, because
Yeah.
the internet, like they just posted on the internet on social media, right? Like the guy who was running down a building and the roof got hit by a missile as he was getting away from the building. It's like, holy shit. It's like, that's kind of hard to stage, you know? Like you're talking about something else and all of a sudden the roof explodes and you're just like, okay, we're out of here. That kind of thing. Anyway, I don't know. I don't know if he's trying to become a martyr for his people or just a really good motivator, but nobody thought this was going to go on this long anyway.
No, they didn't.
All right, so let's push on.
I just have to say, yeah, Putin, it was only going to take until Tuesday.
Everyone
Let it-
says that your mic sounds like you're
Yeah.
20 feet away from it. It is kind of quiet.
Is it really that quiet?
Yeah, I got you cranked
Yeah.
up to 120. Like,
And I'm right in front of the damn mic too, which is worrying.
How quiet is it?
well, people are saying he sounds like he's 20 feet away, but I mean, I can
I'm
hear him just
not.
fine.
I'm
Yeah,
literally
sounds
right
good
in
to
front
me.
of the damn mic.
Okay.
I can go right here, and this is as far as I go because it's like half up. Like
Other than
the
that,
air-
you have to like
So
do unspeakable things to the mic.
yeah, no, I would literally eat the mic.
It's fine. I mean, just turn up your speakers a bit, guys. I guess that's the only thing I can suggest. And okay, so like, I think what Vatnik is saying is actually kind of true. Geographically, they don't have 40% of the country, but they've got most of the population centers either taken over or surrounded. And they've already either attacked or they've already taken control of 3 nuclear plants
Right.
and the hydroelectric plant. And they've taken out airfields. Like, the numbers game is beginning to show. And that's the very thing that like General Jack Keane warned of. He was like, "Look, they're going to put up a great fight, but it's a numbers game." One of the field generals for the Ukraine yesterday said, "Look, I keep killing them, but they keep coming because they're outnumbered, clearly, you know." But then again, he's
Right.
got 98% of his forces that were
No, he's
surrounding the
all in.
country. They
Terry
say that
Scherer
there's
out
still
there says
reserves.
the big deal may
No,
have
not
happened
from what I
tonight.
heard. From what I heard, he's all in at this point.
Well, even if he's all in, I mean, that's enough to do what he's trying to do. It's just there's still that oddity of that convoy not moving. And you know, I had that theory that it was actually staying still, number one, as bait to see if they can get NATO to bomb it, and number two, because they were just waiting for the south approach to catch up. Pincher Kiev.
Or
right?
they're trying to bait the remaining Ukrainian aircraft into attacking it.
That's a possibility too. Now, the other really funny thing was is this morning,
Any better?
yes, it's fine. This morning, Intel was basically saying, "Where'd the tanks go?" Because they've been taking satellite photos of this convoy for a while, and there's a lot of support vehicles, but there were some tracked vehicles, there were some AA vehicles, right? And all of a sudden this morning you hear people going, "Where'd they go?" As if they just vanished. Well, that's a good question then, isn't it? Where did they go? Or were they ever really there? Maybe they just weren't properly identified in the first place. Either way. If that is a reference to Downfall, that's pretty clever. The thing is, though, is he only committed 155,000 troops around the country before he actually started his advance, but the Russian infantry is about 900,000. It's just they're not all here on theater. He's
Well,
got people he's got people in the Far East. He's got people for the Northern Fleet. He's still got the Pacific Fleet. He's still got like home guard somewhere in a buffer between Russia, Mongolia, and China. Like if he had to call other people in, he can do it. It's just he
But
would
you
keep all those
realize that
flanks empty then.
that 900,000 number isn't all infantry.
Right. There's
the
support.
Navy,
There's Navy.
that's
There's Air Force.
That's first aid, medical. That's desk jobs. It's
No.
everything.
No.
together.
That was separate. That figure was 2 million.
Oh, 2 million desk jobs.
That was
All right.
well, not just desk jobs. It's just basically what they were saying was active military, plus staff or whatever, plus support crews and like mechanics and all that stuff, like 900K. Now I don't know if that counts the Dr. Sidney Friedmans too, but you never know, right? Because those guys get rank. Yeah,
would say
and
if he
Ukraine
was
does say
strapped-
that they've reported 12,000 KIA. Now the problem with that, like even I raise an eyebrow to that. Now we know that the Russian military brought in mobile crematoriums. Like those are on camera. They've seen them, right?
Mhm.
So a lot of people are just saying, look, they're hiding their dead by just getting rid of them right on sight. And then like even one of the captured Russian commanders, he was like, look, our guys get killed and there is no body to return home. So they're sort of corroborating that too. But even then, 12,000 bodies, that's a pretty big stack,
Well,
you know?
I have seen the caskets getting sent back to Russia.
So they're not burning all of them then.
They're not burning all of them.
Yeah, they're keeping the officers.
Probably.
what
They're
that
sending
is.
the officers back.
Yeah.
They're keeping the officers.
All right, well, let's move on.
Especially general officers.
yeah, yeah. Well, one Chechnyan general and two top generals.
Yeah, so far.
Send some
And a
old
ship
generals
captain.
over.
There's a ship captain. We'll get to that in a minute, though.
Oh, no.
So 11:50 a.m. Ukrainian time. So this was I think this was a new. Oh no, this is specific to one country. Okay, so here's your picture, and this was a statistic, I guess, by the Romanian government. They have taken in 291,000 refugees in the last 13 days, which is
Really?
Yeah, because I mean, you remember, everyone was usually heading out to Poland first, and then they
Yeah.
they hit a million, but not
And then
not all roads lead to Poland, right? Not all
no,
safe
no.
roads for damn sure.
Yeah.
So
What are safe roads these days?
there are none. I
Yeah,
mean, they're mining the exits.
they are. They literally are.
So, uh, so the refugee numbers, the big ones we were getting were Poland, and then some were coming to Romania, and then Moldova. Like we were getting the Moldova numbers before we were getting the Romanian numbers. But at least
Which
they
is
came
weird
in.
because nobody cares about Moldova.
Well, Moldova's kind of a catch 22, honestly. I think we've discussed this before, but you've got a country that's the poorest in the region. They're struggling to maintain an identity. And then the Russians come in and just say, "We're putting 9,000 troops in your country for a attack that we're staging. Uh, what are you going to do about it? We'll crush you if you oppose this." And they were just like, "Whatever." And then when the Russian soldiers entered Ukraine from the southwest, then the Moldovans instantly turned around and said, "Look, we didn't want to do that. We were forced to do that, and we couldn't stop it because we have no military. We're poor. And we will take in your refugees and we will give them food and jobs and temporary citizenship. We'll put their kids in school." I think we covered that on like day 4 or 5, right? So
Right. Yeah,
they've
we covered that.
been an admirable host, I guess, after developing a bad reputation when this first started. And then the longer it went on, the more we started to realize, no, they were stuck in a Russian armbar, basically, geopolitically speaking, that is.
Mm, yeah.
So anyway, yeah, so 291, and in their refugee numbers are starting to accelerate too. Well, okay, so I guess what it really is, Vatnik, what it really is I always say try to take the news as a bell curve, right? So you can listen to both sides. You can even pull up Al Jazeera and get their take on it, right? But you throw out the highs, you throw out the lows, and then you try to find where every source that you use have things that sort of line up. So you might get 20 stories, and after you're done throwing out the highs and the lows, you're down to 14, and then the only ones that line up are about 7. So I'm only going to bring you the 7. If they're too outlandish, then you're not going to get them, or I'm not going to give them to you because even I don't believe them. Anyway, let's move on. This is a post facto story. So what happened is the event happened, then someone wrote about it, then it was published hours later. Just so you're aware. Uh, so this story posted for me at about close to 5 a.m., which would have been just after lunch in in Ukraine, 12:52 or so. Ukraine posted 2 recordings of phone conversations they claimed provide proof that they killed a top Russian general. This is the guy we talked about yesterday.
Yeah.
In the recordings, a Russian FSB field officer explained they no longer have secure lines to communicate, and that his superior officer, Major General Vitaly Gerasimov, had been killed in combat. This information was actually provided by a third party, a Bulgarian investigative journalist who was in country by the name of Christo Grazov. And he's done a lot of stories like this where he's sort of like a sleuth and then he puts out like, the exposés type of a thing. But the best part is how they got the recordings. Because apparently what's going on is sanctions and everything kind of ruined the telecommunications industry for Russia, and the Russian soldiers are seizing Ukrainian phones, locals' phones, and making calls to other Russians. So it's public record, and they just go over the call logs, and that's how they found it, and they actually have a printed transcript. Anyway, moving on. About an hour later, the United Nations updated their estimates for refugees for Tuesday, and it has now exceeded 2 million people for the last 13 days. The total number that they've come up with so far is 2,011,312. But that was at 2 o'clock, around 2 o'clock Ukrainian time. So it's already been, shit, it's been 14 hours since I got that story. So it could be a whole lot more now. But at least at that time, 2,011,312. Around 1.2 million of them ended up in Poland, while nearly 200,000 were taking refuge in Hungary. That's another one that they didn't really mention too many of, or too often. Countries that both share borders with Ukraine. As the situation continues to unfold, an estimated 4 million people may flee Ukraine, or roughly 10% of their total population. That's a pretty mass exodus. And you know, the way that the story is it's women and children, the elderly and the sick. And usually the fighting age men stay behind, and then you've got a couple of outliers who may not be really in the right physical condition or maybe too old, but they still want to fight, so they annoyingly volunteer and sometimes get in the way. But yeah, they figure about 10% of the total population. Soon, I guess. Well, it is 10% of their population, isn't it? Because it's 40. It would be 4 million. Sorry, it's a 40 million country. Anyway, they're figuring 4 million may eventually flee, which at the rate it's going, that's only what, another 7 to 10 days.
Right.
Yeah, it's pretty sick.
It is. It's pretty bad.
All right. Around the same time, let me see if I have a picture. This guy here. I labeled this picture Puppet. So, former Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych. You might remember him from history of being chased out of the country for being a Putin puppet. Who is considered to be Vladimir Putin's choice for a puppet leader, see, if Russia can overthrow Ukraine's government, has penned a letter to Volodymyr Zelensky urging him to refrain from fighting until the last drop of blood. Yanukovych, who has been taking refuge in Russia's Rostov region after being ousted from the Ukraine in 2014, wrote to Zelensky that you probably dream of being a real hero, but heroism is not for show, nor about fighting until the last drop of blood. It's about self-sacrifice, victory over one's pride and ambition to save lives. He goes on to ask Zelensky to make the conflict end, as if Kyiv's government started the war, and says Ukraine, and the rebel-held Donbas region, and Russia all expect that of him, and Western partners would be glad too. What a dick.
Yeah, I'd probably put a hit up on that motherfucker.
Well,
Yeah, I would too.
I mean, even if he gets installed, they're just going to run him out again.
Mm-hmm.
But if they do this time, maybe they'll get smart and they'll pull an Il Duce on him and hang him by his feet on a street light for all the world to see
Yeah, we're not that lucky.
in HD.
You just want it in HD.
I do. Anyway, moving right along. This next picture is captioned Protest Crackdown. It's the first time a guy looks like he's just going, "Hey, where's my beer? It was right here a second ago." Anyway, United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, said Tuesday that in Russia, the, quote, space for discussion or criticism of public policies, including military action against Ukraine, is increasingly and profoundly restricted. Bachelet said that 12,700 people have been arbitrarily arrested for holding peaceful anti-war protests and noted that media are required to use only official information and terms. It's almost like they have to pass the censors. She said she's concerned about repressive and vaguely defined legislation targeting the dissent, and added that further legislation criminalizing circumstances of discrediting the armed forces continues down this concerning path. A new measure signed into law by President Putin on Friday allows for prison sentences of up to 15 years for spreading what is deemed to be fake information about the Russian armed forces. It has prompted some foreign media to suspend operations and leave Russia. I have a story about that coming up soon, and it's got kind of a joke picture in there. 8K is on the way. Actually, for the finest of apes, um, when I went to visit my aunt in Hokkaido, it's been a couple of years. She already had
Yeah.
it. 12K was around the corner for her. It's just what ends up happening is they deliberately delay the technology to the West
It's
because,
expensive.
well, part of it's expense, but the other part is they're making money. So what they do is they sell you, hey, here's 4K, and then they keep you on 4K until they see that the sales numbers start to taper off, and then the rumors of 8K start becoming big, and then they're like, hey, we got 8K, just as they're going to 12K. And then they bring that to the United States and sell that for a few years. So it's just they're keeping you constantly in the need for the next thing, where their next thing is coming faster and cheaper than ever before. Because I mean, she had it was a 131-inch screen, 8K. It was sick, dude. It was awesome. Anyway, all right, so that's enough of protest crackdown. Let's move on. So now I'm awake.
Mhm.
I woke up at 7 o'clock this morning, realizing that at my age, there are certain things that I can't eat anymore because they don't agree with my insides, and that would be jalapenos. I can eat ghost chili peppers, but I cannot eat jalapenos anymore. Go figure.
You know what I like?
Hmm.
Carolina Reapers.
Ah, no, those are good too. I used to grow those.
Yeah. They come from South Carolina, so you know.
All right, so this
Okay.
this picture is titled "Animosity Sets In," and he's got that look on his face, doesn't he?
Uh oh. Let's see.
So 7 o'clock my time would have been 3 p.m. Ukrainian time. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in a speech Tuesday. So what he does is he addresses the people every evening. One, to tell you he's still alive. Two, to sort of give you like a what's what of the day, at least when he fields, 40 to 50 calls with world leaders and NATO and EU and all this other stuff. Because he had a speech where he spoke to, I want to say, the British Parliament, and it ended in like a minute and a half of standing ovation. And it's just, I'm just sitting there watching this, and I'm just like, he's pouring his heart out to you, and you stand up and clap, and then as soon as the cameras turn off, it's business as usual for you guys, and anything he asked for just went right out your ear. So
More or less.
he's getting pissed. His wife is getting pissed. His people, his diplomats, his parliament, they're all getting pissed. They were like, look, if you're not going to help us, just fuck off. Just tell us that you're not going to help us and fuck off, because obviously I'm not going to give you ratings for my country's downfall. Fuck off. That kind of thing. It's getting to
Right.
that point. And I told you this back on day 2 or 3 of this conflict. I was like, this is going to happen. I fucking tell you, this will
I hate,
happen.
I hate to say this, and it, I wish I could tell them to just stop wasting your time with all these countries and just focus on fighting Russia, because
He
honestly, they're
is.
not going to help you. They're
He
not
is.
going to
It's
help
just he has to try. That's what a leader does. He has to try. Besides, he's got the Klitschko brothers and Alexander Usyk and Lomachenko and a bunch of other athletes fighting for him.
you.
And
Yeah,
I
but
think, let's see,
athletes
we
can only do
got
so much.
heavyweight champion boxers can field very heavy weapons. I'm just telling you.
I
Anyway,
know, I know, I know, but I'm
so
just
he had a
it's
speech
only do
Tuesday.
so
He was
much.
accusing the West of having some, quote, responsibility in the death of Ukrainians because they have not instituted a no fly zone within his borders. So now he's getting very insistent. A move many believe would escalate the war dramatically. Duh. Russia, in the last 30 years, has not lost much of military air equipment. Or, sorry, it didn't translate that well. But he's basically saying in the last 30 years, Russia hasn't lost as much military air power as they've lost in the last 13 days over the skies of Ukraine. And he would be correct. Um, but they still have enough equipment for killing, enough rockets for terror, still enough 500 kilogram bombs in order to throw them down on us. Regular people in Chernihiv, in Kiev, in Odessa, in Kharkiv, Poltava, Zhytomyr. My fucking dogs are going crazy. Anyway, and on many dozens of Ukrainian smaller cities, on millions of peaceful Ukrainian people. 13 days during which we have just been hearing promises when they tell us that yes, very, very soon you'll get help. There will be planes given to us. The fault lies with the invaders, Zelensky added, but in the responsibility for these lies, also with those who have not been able to make an obviously necessary decision somewhere in the West, somewhere in the offices for the last 13 days. Those who have not yet secured the Ukrainian sky from Russian murderers, those who did not save our cities from airstrikes, those from those bombs, missiles, although they could have. Now, okay, I get it. He tried being nice. He tried being insistent. He tried asking. He showed you that his people were getting killed. He showed you the buildings getting hit with missiles that weren't even military targets. They were civilian high-rises. He was showing you people who got mortared trying to escape on the streets of most of his cities and lay dead in the street, right? He's shown you all of these things. And you're constantly telling him, oh, we're going to send you some guns. Here's some helmets. Here you have our thoughts and prayers. Some people were like, the Dutch were like, yo, you guys are badass with javelins.
Here's some more
Here's
helmets.
200 more javelins. Here's some Stinger missiles. And here's some Panzerfaust 3s. You know, keep lighting up them Slav tanks, right?
Did the Germans follow through yet
With what?
with what they said they were going to give them?
I haven't heard of anything. Not
The
particularly.
Germans said they were going to give more missiles and whatnot too.
I
The
wouldn't doubt
problem I see with this is I think it's just going to be just like when the Taliban inherited all that shit from the U.S.
it.
You know what I'm saying? I feel like Russia's going to have all our latest, greatest tech now.
That is a risk, isn't it? You can arm these guys to help them fight for their lives, but if you give them too much too soon, and then it gets overrun and taken, then you're just arming your enemy, aren't you? I mean, that's a very valid point. Very
And the
valid
same
point.
people that are so gung ho about just like giving guns away to a nation with no background checks and God knows where these guns will go, let alone what people. Well, those are the same people that will, insist that we need to have reasonable restrictions on firearms and magazines and, how you can carry it and just.
Maybe.
It's
See, the
just
thing
it's a
is
total
most of the
fleecing
people
of
that you're
America.
seeing, they handed out like crinks and, just your typical arsenal of AKs, under folders, side folders, everything, whatever they had in inventory. They were handing them out to their parliament members. They were handing them out to the family members of military people. They were handing them out to like their neighborhood watch guys. They weren't handing them out to like, hey, you're a 10-year-old kid. Can you hold this? Like I think there was some reason behind it because at the end of the day, they were evacuating the women, the children, the elderly, and the sick, but they sort of insisted that all fighting age men stay behind. So, like a lot of these guys, they would take their wives to the border, turn around, and come right back. There was tons of video of that. But I kind of know where you're going with this, and I know that sort of piggybacked off your other point, which was brilliant, by the way. I think you're the first person to mention that. But yeah, that is a genuine risk. Like, what if you supply drop into an area saying, okay, Mr. Zelensky, we're going to drop this here, and that gets intercepted, and the Russians just wait in ambush, wipe out this small group that came with like 4 trucks, and all of a sudden now they've got 4 trucks and all the stuff you just dropped.
Or not even that. Best case scenario, 45 days later, Russia owns the whole thing.
Yeah.
Including our shit that they never got a chance to use or distribute, along with all those damn helmets you were talking about, and all Federals bullets and
That could be a
POKs and all these
problem.
other people that are. And guess what? Now every time you go to buy a helmet, it's going to cost you an extra $100 because they sent all that crap.
That is a fair
That's
point.
the part that's pissing me off. Is like how come we have all this money all of a sudden to just throw away and give away?
Because
But we can't fix our own roads. We we can't take care of our homeless
I think the answer to that's pretty obvious, actually. I have
because
this
they don't give a
theory.
fuck.
Well, no, I have this theory that the national debt is bullshit. Because if you look at it at the end of the day, what you can actually, like, what if you took the word national debt and you took a red marker and you crossed it out, and you took a black marker and you just wrote the words National operational expenditure. Period.
They,
It's the same thing,
they
right?
spend nearly we spend nearly $750 billion every year just to run our military.
Mm-hmm.
How can we do that when we borrow more than that every year?
I don't know. We're not supposed to
Right?
know.
Does that ring any bell? It doesn't make
Yes.
any sense. Like
It's not
at
supposed
some
to.
point, we're like, "Excuse me, China, can we borrow the money to run our military again? Do you mind?"
Well, a lot of the borrowing from China thing is actually just in the form of trade deficit debt, right? $500 billion a year, as opposed to Russia's $50 billion a year from China. It's like I think it's really funny that we did an embargo on Russia, right? $50 billion trade, and I think we trade more with them than they trade with us. Or no, sorry, Russians do $50 billion of trade with China. We're doing $500 billion a year trade with China. And it's like, okay, I think the reason China hasn't been making too much of a stink right now is because if we can cut Russia out financially like we did globally, imagine what would happen if we did it to China with its $500 billion every year. That would kill them, supposedly. Anyway, uh, let's move on.
Sorry to sidetrack you.
No,
I'm
no.
good at that.
Look, the tangents are perfectly fine. I thought your point was brilliant. Like, I'm seriously, you're the first person I've heard that from, and it makes perfect sense to me. Like, yeah, if you
Yeah,
put it down
thanks, man.
there and they take it,
Oh, and here's another thing. If we couldn't afford to bring our own shit back from the Middle East, how come we can afford to send shit?
dude, I wish you were here like 2 months ago. I was on a rant going, "Where's my fucking MRAP?"
Yeah.
You're just gonna give them
I
away.
don't even want that. Where is my Connex container of 556 and 762?
Where's my quad tube nods?
Yeah.
I'm a reasonable guy. Give me an MRAP, quad tube nods, and like a 249 Bravo and a Mark 19, and I'm happy.
I want to get some nods. That shit's expensive.
Yep. All right. So 8 o'clock. This is where I'm trying to keep the dogs from going crazy and feeding them and messing with puppies and fucking trying to get ready for work. 9:11 a.m. Eastern time. What a coincidence. Here's the picture I got for you. This was from his press conference.
Dogs.
9 dogs, yes. 4 for sale. Hit me up. Um, in a surprising turn of events, President Biden is expected to announce, and this did happen. This is the way it was written, or the way I wrote it before it happened. President Biden is expected to announce a ban on Russian oil imports to the U.S. amid bipartisan pressure. As Russia continues its invasion of Ukraine, this is all the yada yada part, right? The president is set to make remarks from the White House around 10:45 a.m., which he did, where he will announce actions to continue to hold Russia accountable for its unprovoked and unjustified war against Ukraine. As the war rages on, Americans are facing the surge in gas prices, and the Biden administration is facing calls from Republicans and Democrats in Congress, as well as Ukrainian President Zelensky, to ban imports of Russian oil and increase domestic energy production. Zelensky on Monday called for boycotts of Russian oil imports to the U.S. and European countries. So,
Wait. We were on the track to doing that,
I
and
know,
then that
I
asshole
know.
Biden got in
I
charge
know.
and killed
I-
all of that and ruined our economy and and the gas prices already.
Well, so here's the thing, right? The solution I wrote when I wrote this little segment was, so shut the EPA up, crack open the Keystone, readopt all of Trump's energy policy, and never look back, you dopey-headed, easily flustered, stuttering, child-sniffing simpleton. Because that's what he is. Anyway, it gets worse. Like, what he did today is going to get worse. And I'll explain it out here in a bit. But it's going to be good. No, I mean, like, actually, here it is. I have a picture I want to share with you right here. Okay. Now, some of you thought this was a good idea the other day when I was talking about the Great Wall of China and how we were going to enforce a no-fly zone and everything. So if you weren't here for that or you missed it, basically somebody had posed a question in the chat. Like, it was the perfect timing because chat was active. And somebody said, look, if we do a no-fly zone, NATO, collectively, not one nation, who would bear the brunt of the lion's share of enforcing the no-fly zone. And so far, your military leaders and your pundits and your news people and your armchair generals, they all come up with the same typical ideas, but it always points back to, well, we're going to have to do it because Poland only has 28 MiG-29s and Germany doesn't want to really, scratch up their whatever, shit like that, right? And it always ends up us being the ones who go and sweep up the mess. And it's us who bleed the most, and it's us who loses the most, and it's them who criticize us for joining late or some shit, right? It's just the way it works. It's how it's stupid. I get it. So anyway, when they asked me this question, I came up with the answer almost instantly. And the only reason I had it was because I had written Trump 3 times throughout his presidency, like basically just saying, please consider this, put this in front of whoever you have to, and write me a check for coming up with the idea. Send me a check, right? But what I said is if you're going to build this wall, a wall is only as good as its enforcement of it. Meaning you can put up a fence, but I mean, if no one's there to watch it, someone's just going to hop over it or tunnel under it, right? What good is that? So I said, why don't you take a page from China's playbook and build it like the Great Wall of China? Build it as installations. Every 30 to 40 miles has livable spaces in it. And you just put in a couple of squads of QRFs every 30 or 40 miles. So they just hang out. And then you want to expand on the military budget? You want to give people more things to do? You see that picture right there? This is how you do it. You employ 100,000 new drone operators. 100,000 of them. You expand that program. And then you can expand the support staff, the guys who have to keep those drones armed, the guys who've got to keep those things running. You got to get the electricians and the IT guys who keep the network running that these pilots who sit in these chairs have to fly, right? And here's the best part of it. You fly that like Strategic Air Command across the border 24 hours a day. And if you catch anything on night vision or FLIR or whatever, you just relay the GPS coordinates to the closest QRF that's living in the wall. And if you really want to fuck with them, you use the drone.
The cluster bombs.
Well, not to kill the people coming across our border, but what you could do.
Oh, my bad.
Is you can arm the drones with like infrared paint or something. You can cluster them with those. And then so the QRF guys can just drive up and catch the idiot that's coated in paint saying, you're not getting out of this, buddy. We see this shit all over you, right? So it's like, you do that, and what you ended up doing is you expanded the military, and you've taken 100,000 people and put them on a job where they have training 24 hours a day, 7 days a week as their MOS. And then when you have a situation like the Ukraine, where you say, who's going to enforce the no-fly zone? Take 50,000 of those guys, send them over to like Ramstein Air Force Base with all the drones you need, and let them do it. You let them fly over the skies. And then if they get shot down, or if they catch a MiG coming at them, or an Su-35 flanker coming at them, then you send a real piloted plane to take out that Ruski fuck. And in the meantime, if you see like an anti-aircraft battery and you have an armed drone, take it the fuck out. That's how you do it. That way nobody dies. You just use drones. And I know what you're going to say. What if they shoot one down and capture the technology? Well, that's a risk. But it's a risk if you put a man on the ground and he gets captured too. They'll beat him. They'll torture him. It's intel. They'll reverse engineer his body until he coughs up whatever you need to hear. So here's the best part of this whole plan. This is the best part of this plan. Allow the military to diversify their recruitment standards, allowing people that are over the age of 40 who still have good hand-eye coordination and physical conditioning, and let them join up to serve the drone force so you don't pull away the younger people that you need elsewhere, where their physical advantages over older adults would cause them to underperform, right? So it's like every branch of the service has an enlistment standard. And if you're over a certain age, you can be in peak physical condition, but if you're over a certain age, they're like, sorry, thank you for coming, but we can't take you, right? Well,
I mean,
think about me.
the only
I'm 42 years old, okay? My generation created the internet. The next generation that followed me made it faster, okay? I will admit that. But my generation and the one that followed, we're the video game generation. We're the Ace Combat Simulator generation. We're the BattleTech generation. We're the MechWarrior generation. We're the fucking what's that really good one that's out right now that everyone's playing? Flight sim type thing. No, I can't remember. George plays it all the time. But the point is, we're that generation, right? So even though I'm 42 years old, I'm in good physical shape. I have good hand-eye coordination. I still have 2015 eyesight. If I wanted to serve my country, I can just go, look, put me behind a drone device like that, and let me do this, so that younger guy can be the mechanic that you need to keep it running, or let that younger guy be, I don't know, the cook that you need, or the infantry guy that you need. They could be somewhere else where you need a younger guy, but I can still be useful for the cause because I don't have to be a detriment to younger people on the battlefield. You see what I'm saying? So it's like you can enlist people past the original cutoff for this job and have tons of volunteers that want to do it. And you don't even have to make them officers or anything. Like, if it's that easy of a job, or if you don't think it's as valuable as the guy who's got to sit there and, be in the shit, fine, whatever. Whatever justification you need. At least you got the bodies that want to do it. That's the solution. That's how you do it. So, like Fine Ape was saying, so Skynet Light. Yes, in a way, yes. But in the grand scheme of things, no, I can't remember the name of it. It's some super freaking badass flight sim now. It's a combat flight sim, but
DCS.
yes. Well,
There we go.
it's that one, and
Yeah.
there's one other one. The other one I'm thinking
That's
of,
the one everybody plays.
well, the other one I'm thinking of, it's already in its 7th version of it. So whatever that is it Ace Combat 7 or something? Maybe, I don't know. I don't play that one. And then you've also got guys, let's be fair, okay? You've also got guys who just play Microsoft Flight Simulator. I play that. You've also got X-Plane, things like that, right?
Yep.
So you don't need all these guys to be combat flight simulator guys, because if you're an observation drone, you've got to be slow and methodical. You've got to do big circles and sweeping arcs. You got to make sure you paint the canvas, up and down. You don't skip spots, things like that, right? So those guys are valuable too. But that's the solution, because now you're not putting men in planes over combat areas. Not until you know that there's an interceptor on the way. Then you can decide, look, can I get this drone low and slow, or up into the tree line and get the hell out of there before they actually intercept me? Or do you have a couple of guys in F-35s or whatever you want to use and say, hey, turn the drone around at this heading, and our guys are going to intercept you before the Russians do, and then we'll neutralize that. And then if you have enough fuel left, you can turn around and finish your run. Stuff like that, right? Now we're getting into tactics, but I mean, the point is I had this whole planned diatribe of that, and it was just like, who do I got to send that to? Because that's the solution. Anyway, let's move on. Because already, god damn it, I'm already an hour in and we're not even halfway through. Sorry. All right.
I told you, Sean.
Yeah,
I told you.
whatever. 10:01 a.m., 6 p.m. It's an hour into the Ukrainian curfew. If you're not supposed to be on the streets, you're not on the streets. They have like a klaxon or whatever they do. I think I heard it once or twice. It's different in 2 cities. Everyone goes and locks down if they're not evacuating, that kind of thing. This one was kind of odd. Russia threatens to close its main gas line to Germany if Western nations ban Russian oil imports. In an address on Russian state television, Alexander Novak, deputy prime minister of the Russian Federation, warned that the rejection of Russian oil would lead to catastrophic consequences for the global market, suggesting that the price per barrel could easily exceed $300. Right.
Good.
Given the European Union gets 40% of its gas and 30% of its oil from Russia, Novak asserted that it would be, quote, impossible to quickly find a replacement for Russian oil on the European market. It would take years, and it will still be much more expensive for European consumers.
Years.
He warned so ultimately they'll be hurt the worst by this outcome. Now,
Mm-hmm.
here's what's kind of funny. If you go and look at this timeline so far, right? We knew that this invasion was coming. NATO started making contingency plans. Germany kept going, maybe we shouldn't really get into that. And everyone looked at Germany like, dude, what the fuck? You're supposed to be with us. Why are you bogarting this shit? And Germany's like, well, because 65% of our energy comes from Russia. And then all of NATO was like, shit. How much of ours? Like, they're looking at their guys going, how much of our energy comes from Russia? And after a while, they got their answers, and then they turn around and they go, nope, we're still doing it anyway. And Germany was like, we really can't do that, guys. Seriously. We can't follow through with that. Come on, let's be reasonable. But after, a couple more days, the pressure got to them, and even Germany decided, you know what, fuck it. We're raising our spending, and we're sending 20,000 of our troops to Slovakia because America, they decided that they would backfill our troop movement. So we'll put ours forward, and then they'll come and fill our home guard. But apparently, 1.3 Americans is worth, or no, sorry, one American's worth like 1.3 Germans. Because they sent 20,000 troops and we backfilled with 7,000. Whatever. Whatever. It got the deal done, right? Anyway. So the thing is Germany's already coming around, right? And then this threat came out. And then the United States said, we're banning Russian oil. They said that they would shut down the pipeline to Germany if we stopped buying their oil. Well, shortly afterwards, so did the UK. So that means they're going to turn the oil off on Germany and the gas. And Germany's going to be like, what the fuck? You guys, you just had us turned off because you said you weren't going to buy Russian oil. And then we're just going to look at Germany and go, look, we're all in this together, right? Just pull up your pants and tighten your belt. We forced it into them, sort of. Like, they didn't have a say-so in this.
No, they didn't.
Oh, well. It is what it is. Moving right along. This was kind of a sad story. It's 7 o'clock Ukrainian time, and the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, these are the guys who are like the global nest team, I guess is a good way to put this. They stated that more than 200 people are working at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine and have not been able to go home since February 24th. The same staff are still on duty for 12 straight days.
Same underwear?
I don't know, man. They can't go home. The Russians won't let them go home, right? Now, when I read that, for some stupid reason, Captain America the First Avenger came into my head. And it was that scene where they had slave labor building those super weapons or whatever.
Right.
And then, like, the Red Skull was like, I need you to raise their production. And they were like, but sir, the workers, they're already at capacity. They could die. And he goes, it's okay, my good man. We can always get more workers. Remember that?
Yeah.
These guys have been
Yeah,
working
I
for
remember that.
12 days straight, like prisoners. No talk about food, shower, tidy whities, like you eloquently pointed out.
Mm-hmm.
I thought Chernobyl was shut down. What the hell? Anyway, yeah,
Well, remember, it's
it's
only
slave labor.
one reactor
It's not
melted down.
Slav labor, it's slave labor. Well, yeah, but Chernobyl only has one.
No, they have a
They
couple.
had two, now they got one.
Mhm.
Zaporozhye had six.
Yep.
Anyway, moving right along. Slave labor, Slav labor. Anyway, poor guys are getting worked to death.
So it's Slav labor then.
Slav labor, yeah.
Mm. That's a bad joke, Sean.
I
You should feel
know,
bad.
sorry. All right,
Feel bad.
so yeah, so anyway, like a minute later, right? So this was like bing bing bing. This was Russia makes the threat, then the IAEA releases that information, and then at 5 o'clock Greenwich time, UK, United Kingdom Business and Energy Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng, that's a real solid British name, announced Tuesday that the UK will also phase out the import of all Russian oil and oil products. There's a caveat to this. By the end of the year. Now, I'm sorry. If you're going to make that declaration and the Russians are watching, the Russians should just be like, fuck you. We're cutting you off right now then. Right? That just seems like the typical likely response. But then again, they're desperate
I
to
mean, that,
sell. They had
that would have meant
7.
something
Huh?
like 5 months ago. That would have meant something like 5 months ago.
Yeah. But the thing is like, they had 7 full tankers of oil up at auction 3 or 4 days ago. Russians did. Okay? 0 bids. Nobody was buying. The market regulated itself. They boycotted it themselves. And then 2 days ago, I put out a story with the letter of Shell Oil saying that they made the difficult decision of purchasing Russian oil. But the hit piece that followed was epic because we found out what price they got it at. They bought it at $29 below market value. So at the time of the sale, oil was like $119 or something like that. They got it for like $80 or $90 a barrel. That's why they bought it. It wasn't the reluctantly hard decision. No, they were being capitalists and they were like, cheap oil? Fuck yeah. Well, unfortunately, the fallout from that, people instantly started calling boycotts for Shell Oil. They reneged on the deal literally 12 hours later. They were like, we're not going to be able to stop this. Let's just cancel the sale. Sorry. We can't buy that. Because they knew they were going to lose more in the end.
Yeah.
So anyway, UK basically says they're not going to buy any more Russian oil, but then they added until the end of the year. If I was Russia and I heard that, I'd be sort of pissed. Like, they have to sell it because they have no other buyers. But then again,
OPEC, right?
what's that?
Russia's not part of OPEC, right?
No.
So get our oil from OPEC, I guess.
Well, see, the joke is I don't know why anyone's worried about, or I don't know why Russia's worried about us not buying. First of all, during the height of our energy independence, we were pumping out more oil per day, or producing more oil per day, than we're buying from Russia in a month.
Right.
So I don't know what the big deal is. But then again, right now, we have a 1.5 million barrel a day deficit right now with our current production. So we have to get it somewhere. Because, Captain Child Sniffer or Captain Sundowner, the Child Sniffer, he can't do the math. Whatever. Anyway, let's move on. So now it's finally noon in DC. And oh yeah, let me put up the picture. Sorry. I do have a picture for this one. There you go. I even got lovely little captions for you guys to read. Enjoy. It took me a little bit of time to write that, but it's got some facts in it, so you might enjoy that. President Joe Biden said Tuesday that the decision for the U.S. to ban Russian gas and oil imports is going to cause some soaring domestic gas prices to rise even further, but warned fuel companies that it is, quote, no time for profiteering or price gouging. The decision today is not without cost here at home, he told the reporters. Putin's war is already hurting American families at the gas pump. Now remember, this joker has been trying to blame everything for the last year and 3 months on the Russians.
No.
Yeah?
He tried blaming, at least for the first 6 months or first year, he tried blaming it on Trump. And then that didn't work. He defaulted to Russia.
Yeah. But I mean, let's just glance over the fact that he shut down Keystone on the first day and about 100,000
He
people
stopped
lost their jobs
fracking.
within 48 hours. And
Mhm.
he basically militarized the EPA. Oh, we'll get to that actually, because
we ramp up
I'll
fracking
talk about the
production,
I'll talk about the excuse
ramp up
farm after.
pipelines, finish the Keystone. We would be. I would say we'd be energy independent, honestly.
Technically, Keystone wasn't going to be operational until about now, if he had not closed it. But we
Which
still
would
would.
have been perfect timing.
I'd
But
still
if
be
he,
paying $17 for a tank of super though,
well,
not
that's
71.
you.
Anyway, where did I leave off? Let's see.
Hey,
Putin's war is already hurting American families at the gas pump. Since Putin began his military buildup on the Ukrainian borders, just since then, the price at gas pumps in America went up 75 cents. And with this action, it's going to go up further. I'm going to do everything I can to minimize Putin's price hike here at home. He's really laying this at Russia's feet. In coordination with our partners, we have already announced that we're releasing 60 million barrels of oil from our joint oil reserves. To the oil and gas companies and to the finance firms that back them, we understand Putin's war against the people of Ukraine is causing prices to rise. We get that. That's self-evident. But it's no excuse to exercise excessive price increases or padding profits or any kind of effort to exploit this situation for American consumers. Now, if you didn't read the captions, I will just paraphrase this for you. First of all, the strategic oil reserves are not for you and me. It never was intended for you and me. It was intended for the use of the national defense, the military, if our oil infrastructure was crippled, like what's going on in Ukraine, right? A military needs fuel and oil and jet fuel and you name it. KY jelly, I don't fucking know. Anyway, the point is
Wrong type of
60
petroleum.
million barrels of oil could maintain your military for weeks. But 60 million barrels of oil in a populated country of 350 million, roughly, that's no bueno. Do the math. We use 18.2 million barrels of oil a day in this country. 60 million barrels, I did the math for you, 3 days and 7 hours worth of oil. The other fact is, every time he taps into that reserve, our military just got a little bit weaker. And on top of that, oil prices tend to skyrocket faster because everybody knows this doesn't help. It doesn't work. His brain doesn't work. He's literally undermining the security of our country. 60 million barrels. What a fucking joke. Now, if it was 60 million barrels just for the state of Washington, or just for the state of Texas, or just for the state of disarray, that might mean something. But when 350 million people need it, it's a drop in the bucket, literally. Let's move on.
Hey,
Yep.
sorry to interrupt. I got to run. I've got a prior engagement I've got to attend.
That's fine. I mean, I tend to run these long anyway. I'm just glad you came.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, if you drop by tomorrow, we'll see you then.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Right.
I'll be in the audience listening for a little bit.
Cool. Right on.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, brother.
Later.
Have a good night, guys.
Later.
Night.
All right. So, oh man. Okay, so this is where I'm going to start trolling. So just bear with me because I had to look for this picture I used to have in my 4chan folder from my other days. Anyway, Here you go. Enjoy. I even put the song at the bottom. 8:18 p.m. Ukrainian time, which was lunchtime for me at noon, right? But I don't eat till 2:30. Anyway, fast food giant McDonald's finally announced Tuesday that it is temporarily halting its operations in Russia. In Russia, we employ 62,000 people who have poured their heart and soul into our McDonald's brand and to serve their communities. We work with hundreds of local, whatever, this is all PR bullshit. The fact of the matter is, they're shutting down 850 locations. Finally, after being
Now,
pressured.
hold on. Is that all locations, or
That's
is
all
that
of them.
just some of them?
That's all of them.
Okay.
That's all the locations in Russia. Now, as a gesture of good faith, because they know it's not their employees that are the problem, right? They're going to keep everyone on the payroll. Even though they're not going to operate, they're still going to pay everyone's wages. That's pretty solid. Let's be fair. That's pretty solid. But they had to have their arm twisted to do it. Because when people were starting to cancel Russia, a week ago, McDonald's held out. They were like, "No, this is cool."
They
Coca-Cola,
wanted to
no,
make that
Pepsi
extra
also
ruble.
didn't do that. Hmm?
They wanted to make the extra ruble before it went,
They
tits
had to
up.
make an extra 100 rubles to make up for the 1 ruble that they lost before.
Exactly.
But anyway, I just thought it was kind of funny that they got caught and then they finally tried to sound like they were the saviors of the people, but then they end up saying, well, we had to pay our guys. And that's pretty solid. So I guess that's cool. Wait a minute. Fine Ape is saying, so what I'm hearing from you is that we need to resuscitate the nuclear cruiser and destroyer programs. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we do. See, in Fallout, like we talked about this, and I know you might be sick of it, and I'm sorry if you're sick of hearing me talk about Fallout. It's just that game literally changed my life. Like I was a pretty casual gamer, it's like whatever was new and fun and my friends were all playing, I'd go play it, but I never really got into them. I wasn't engrossed in them. And then like my friends were playing Fallout 3. This is way back in like 2008 or something like that, 8 or 9. Anyway, they were
Yeah.
talking about it daily, and I'm just like, will you please shut up? And they were like, no, dude, you got to play it. And I'm like, is it online? They're like, no. I'm like, why the hell would I want to play a single player game? That's boring, right? Because online gaming was big then. And
It's still big.
it's still big, I know. But anyway, they were like, just try it. You'll see what we're talking about.
Right.
So I did. And as soon as I saw the intro to the game, that was it. I'm like, oh my god, where has this been my whole life, right? Anyway,
Yep.
the thing about that makes Fallout very interesting is it's supposed to mimic our history, our world's history. But at the end of the Second World War, that's where the two realities split. And I'm not talking some bullshit Marvel multiverse garbage. No, what I meant
No.
is in that point in history, in Fallout, the world embraced the atom. They went all in, meaning everything was nuclear or fission or fusion, right? They put all their efforts towards developing that and making it better and cleaner and smaller. It went into your car, it went into an aircraft, everything was nuclear.
You're forgetting one very important thing too, Sean.
Mr. Handy.
No, they ran out of oil a lot sooner than we did.
Yes, they did. Okay, fair enough. They were sort of pushed into that alternative.
Mhm.
Whereas
They were
we
pushed into using in fusion and
yes.
in
And then
nuclear.
whereas we decided on our real timeline in real life that we would dabble with it, but we kept looking at it with a very skeptical eye, which is
Mhm.
why after so many years of having harnessed the atom, we're way behind technologically. Like reactors should be smaller, cleaner, much more efficient, producing less waste. There should be everything should be running on it by now. Like you want to talk about clean, cars, electric cars. Listen, an electric car is useless if you have to drive across the country. So if you had a nuclear car, then that would make sense. Now, I don't know if many of you know this, and I'm I'm just beating around the edges here. But a Los Angeles class nuclear submarine's reactor compartment's only about the size of a phone booth. That's well known, so it's not like I'm going to have alphabets knocking on my door talking about trade secrets like Tom Clancy or anything.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, a nuclear submarine, big nuclear submarine, phone booth. Not bad, right? Imagine if we did do the nuclear cruiser or the nuclear destroyer. I mean, the propulsion system is already in submarines. It's already in aircraft carriers. Scale it down a little bit. Cruisers and destroyers. Job done. Less oil dependence, right? Makes sense to me. It's okay, whatever. I think the more this goes on and the more we start talking about energy independence post this war, that's going to become a very active conversation again. I think the world is going to embrace the atom again, but it's going to come with some incredibly stiff regulations in the event of war.
Mm-hmm.
Olav estov pikoye, comrade. You'll see what I mean if you look at the chat later. Anyway, man, talking about this conflict has made me really brush up on my Russian again too. It sure has. All right, let's move on. We're past the halfway point now, so that's good.
Though using the name you're using, you should probably brush up on your Lithuanian.
Lithuanian. My father was a fisherman.
That's another story for another day.
Yeah, they can't see that part of the Discord right now anyway.
I know, but still.
All right, so this is kind of a longer story, but I wanted to be thorough with this. But I did caption it. I hope you enjoy it. I promise you it's less vulgar than the last picture. Although, the stuff on the right, I saw that and I was just like, what I put in her response to the question on the left, that was her actual answer. But the things on the right was going on in her mind, and the answer fits even that. So sorry for the bad joke. You might find it funny. I don't know. Anyway, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This was after the announcement of cutting off oil and all this stuff. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, when asked for her thoughts on the U.S. banning Russian oil imports and whether the Biden administration should turn to Iran or Venezuela instead, said, "None of these options are good ones because of our dependency on oil." Now, I left a note here saying, okay, she's doing pretty good so far. That's a fair answer. I think this is the deal with fossil fuels in general, is that it's not an accident that oil-rich states tend to be petro-authoritarian states, she says. You know, this is where I left the comment where I took back what I just said, and I'm like, which wouldn't have been a problem if we stayed energy independent before your boy Biden came along, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now she's talking about little dictatorships that are rich in oil. Yeah, okay, I can see how she says that they're petro-authoritarian states, but we were oil independent. We were a net exporter, which means it wouldn't have mattered to us because we wouldn't be filling the coffers of those little terrorist states, right? So what she's saying there doesn't make any sense. It just makes sense now because her boy fucked up the country. So anyway, and so none of these options are good ones because of our dependency on oil. And so while I understand that there are short-term, this is exact words, supply issues that need to be addressed, it's very alarming that many of the people pushing to increase and skyrocket either imports or domestic production in the short term, are not talking about what we really need to be doing in terms of rapid investments in solar and wind. Can we please drop her off in Mogadishu and just see how much wind she can generate out of that face of hers to get her ass back home?
No, we need to drop her off in Somalia.
That's Mogadishu. We drop her off there with Kamala Harris's thickest set of knee pads and see how long it takes for her to get home. Just saying, man. I mean, I promise you, she'll come back and she'll just scream about how, oh my God, it's going to be like a Starvin' Marvin episode. Where'd all these flies come from? Just telling you. That girl ain't seen trouble.
No.
She don't know trouble. Anyway. I hope you guys like the little thing on the side. Anyway.
Pretty good.
1:46 p.m. Still haven't had lunch yet. Getting grumpy. Getting hungry. 9:46 Ukrainian local time. Evening. The Polish government said, now this was great news. The Polish government said that it is ready to transfer all of their MiG-29 fighter jets to a U.S. military installation in Ramstein, Germany. Now, when I first heard this story, it was worded different. It said the Polish government is willing to transfer MiG-29 jets to Ramstein, Germany. And I thought, wait a minute. You're going in the wrong direction, you idiots. You need to go east, not west.
No, they're doing it for a reason.
I know. I let it simmer, and then I had questions, and I got the questions answered. So when they said they want to transfer some of their MiG-29s, my first question was, great, how many do you have? Or how many are you sending? The answer was, all of them. And I thought, wow, okay, that's a great gesture, right? We're giving you all of it, everything we've got. You could have all of them. And I thought, man, that's awesome. And then I thought, why Ramstein? And I thought, wait a minute, that makes sense. You put it on a large airbase in a safe place, and then you ferry out Ukrainian pilots to come and get them. Like, we just smuggle the pilots out, bring them over, put them in the planes, and then let them fly safely back to wherever they need to take them. That makes sense.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm on board. Because all of a sudden, if a bunch of MiG-29s took off from Poland, heading east, a lot of Russian anti-aircraft radar is going to pick that up, without a doubt. At least from Ramstein, they can like scramble in from all different angles, and they can get there safely. So, and if the Russians wanted to go and preemptively destroy the planes, they'd have to fly over a couple of countries to get there. Article 5 times 5, right? Like, it would be super verboten. So I was like, okay, I guess that makes sense. The move comes as speculation has grown in recent days that Poland may move to donate the jets to Ukraine at the request of the Ukrainian government after a NATO no-fly zone over the country was ruled out. The U.S. will reportedly backfill the Polish military with new American-made F-16 fighter jets. And I left a little note here. Don't you love how they used my term, backfill?
Yeah, I know.
You notice that? I've been using that every day since this started. And now all of a sudden the media is.
I think they're secretly watching us.
I think they are. I think I'm also the illegitimate son of Mark Levin, but that's a different story.
I wouldn't say that.
Yeah, I've got his attitude. That's for goddamn sure.
Well,
All right, moving on.
you aren't the only one.
So
I was
now,
gonna go with the illegitimate child of Ron White.
Yeah.
well, in terms of drinking, yes. Anyway, yeah, I don't have 300 head of Yorkie yet, but he does have 300 head of Scottish Terrier. That's confirmed. Anyway, let's move on.
If we must.
I went a little bit off the timeline here for some reason, so my apologies, but a little bit earlier at 1:24.
Probably a good reason.
Oh no, you know what? I just cut and pasted this in the wrong spot. These two stories I got from I typed them in when I was at work and I mailed them to myself. But I was watching an interview at about 1:20ish, and it was an interview with Larry Kudlow, who was Trump's economic advisor, I think. I think he was his economic advisor. The guy is sharp. And he's got a really good uh, he's good at speaking in layman's terms. I guess let me put it that way. He's got an easy voice to listen to. He doesn't talk to you like you're thick. You know, anything he explains, you can like, got it. You can have no experience in anything economics, and when he explains it to you, you're just like, shit, I got that. I get it, right? That's a rare quality. So anyway, they were picking apart this narrative for the last couple of days that Jen Psaki has been putting out there. And it says Washington says that they have 9,000 plus drilling leases available, and that oil companies need just to take them and go do something with them. And that would solve domestic oil production. And
No.
she says, maybe you should ask the oil companies why they're not doing it instead of me. Right? She keeps banging that drum. And Larry Kudlow took that apart. Good God, did he take that apart? And he goes, listen, they're pulling the wool over your eyes. Yes, there are 9,000 drilling leases available. Yes, Biden's administration added 4,000 of those drilling leases in the last 15 months. That is all true. What they're not telling you is, during the Trump administration, there were over 5,000 drilling leases still. And what had happened is the federal government, or sorry, the oil companies rushed to grab as many more as possible before the new administration had taken over. So it was sort of like it was almost like getting a Form 1 done, right? They put in all their paperwork, and then by the time the administration had taken over, all the paperwork for that particular part of the process had cleared. So there's 9,000 leases. The problem is there's no confidence. All these oil companies have all these leases that they can go and apply to take and go do, but they have to survey the lease. They have to build the platform and the rig. They have to hire all the crew and the wildcatters and the drillers. They have to hire all the maintenance staff. They have to take care of all the sundries if it's in a remote location, meaning you have to build a small city, basically, that makes that platform self-sufficient. We're talking tens of billions of dollars just to get it going. And who's to say that that lease isn't going to produce very well? So it might be a bust, right? So you got all that going against you. And on top of that, the EPA has been acting like the ATF. They can just change their mind all of a sudden and regulate you right off the lease. So these guys don't want to take the risk because of the initial layout, the fear of getting regulated off, and on top of that, the federal government isn't selling them the sales permits to get the oil out of the ground and into the market. That's the big part that no one's talking about. You can have the lease all you want. It's like, I think the way it was described to me was, we will do all the financing paperwork to buy a new car, but we will not hand you the keys. That's basically what the oil companies are dealing with right now. They did all the paperwork, and yet they haven't been given the bureaucratic green light to go drill and then sell what they drilled. That's why they're not doing it. It's not really their fault. At first I thought it was the government, then I thought it was the oil company's fault, and then if you dig even further, nope, it's the government's fault. And Larry Kudlow pretty much laid it all out. And yeah, like Jen Psaki's gonna look like such a ginger asshole tomorrow. Especially if what's his face is up there, Peter Ducey instead of what's her name, Jackie Heinrich. Anyway, yeah, she's gonna get her shit pushed in pretty badly.
I hope so.
I hope so
I would
too.
love
So what you're saying is you sent that to Peter Ducey to ask?
I actually did tweet that to Peter Ducey, as a matter of fact. I was like,
Good man.
I was like, I know you're very busy working the DC office, but you really need to see that Larry Kudlow interview earlier. I was like, you really need to see that. Anyway, um, moving along. 2:57. This is right after I had lunch. This is now about 11 p.m. Ukrainian time. So it's late. Dark. Oh, you're gonna love this too. I I titled this picture Suka.
Suka.
Suka. Actually, isn't that
Suka.
what the little Ewoks used to say all the time? Yeah.
No,
No.
no.
No. Sorry, my mistake. It was what those little guys in Spaceballs used to say. Or was it?
Mm,
No, that was the Mandalorian with the egg. Yeah, that's what it was. Anyway,
are we sure on that one?
what? What?
Yeah, you know what? That sounds about right.
Yeah, it was the thing with the egg. I remember that. Anyway, one of the Russian Navy warships that attacked Ukraine's Snake Island last month sank after a Ukrainian counterattack Monday night. Military sources in Kyiv reports. So, they call into command and control saying, "Hey, we fired this many this many artillery and we struck a ship and it sunk." That's basically what they're saying. The Ukrainian Defense Forces manning the island earned international praise on February 24th when they responded to a naval vessel demanding their surrender with defiance. "Russian ship, go fuck yourself," one of them said over the loudspeaker. Video shared by the
Yeah.
Ukrainian Navy Monday showed a nighttime rocket barrage, which soldiers described as holiday fireworks, blasting off from the waterfront city of Odessa before a distant target on the water blew out into flames. Units of the Marines of the Naval Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine defending Odessa region hit an enemy ship. That's what the translation of the video read. Now, I would play you the video, but in all honesty, it's just all blackness, and you see a bunch of rockets just going straight up in the blackness. And then way off in the distance, you see this huge little poof of an explosion out on the horizon. And then the guy's like, "Suka!" It's like, what the fuck? Anyway, so the caption read that the defenders of the Odessa region hit an enemy ship. The enemy attempted to retreat again. In the clip, the soldiers can be heard speaking in Ukrainian, and after the launch, they said, "Did we get it?" And according to the translation of the video, somebody replies, "I don't see it yet," because the munitions were still heading to the target. And then all of a sudden, there was a loud explosion, and they said, "Look, we got the warship." The first man replies, "It's on fire," and they celebrate a direct hit with some profanity. And on the PA system, they said, "We fucking hit them," before one of them repeats the Snake Island defender's famous line of, "Russian ship, go fuck yourself." Yeah. The
And
struck
ironically-
vessel was later identified as the Vasily Baikov, the same ship that demanded that the Ukrainian troops surrendered. And that's a picture of the ship before it
Now,
sank.
ain't that karma?
Yeah. It's the ship. That's a picture of what it looks like before it sank. It's a good looking boat, if I'm honest. Very plain
Yeah.
looking, but sharp. Anyway.
Well, it's a destroyer. What do you want?
Eh.
Oh, it's not a destroyer.
Eh. No.
Smaller.
It's an artificial reef now.
Yeah.
I'd say it's
Yep.
destroyed.
Yeah. All right. Well, you know what? It serves them fucking right. Because you know what they did? Those bastards took a Estonian cargo ship and threatened it. They were like, "You go ahead of us to that pier over there, and we'll follow behind you. And if you don't, we'll sink you." So the captain of that boat was like, "Well, fuck, I don't have a choice." So he pushed on forward, and he hit a sea mine, and his ship sank, and one of his sailors died. So, this is justice. Moving right along.
Moo.
3 p.m. my time, 11 p.m. on the dot, Ukrainian time. And there was an interview, a public address for the first time. I don't remember seeing this ever before in the 13 days. Ukrainian First Lady, Olena Zelenska. I guess that's weird. His name is Zelensky, and her last name is Zelenska.
Maybe
Maybe
he's
it's
part
like
of the
a
Russian
dialect thing. Anyway, she called on NATO to enforce a no-fly zone over the skies of Ukraine, a move the alliance has resisted over fears it could escalate the conflict with Russia and draw NATO into the war. And what we need is you to close the sky, she said in an open letter posted to her social media on Tuesday. Finally, take off the white gloves. You still can't keep neutrality because Putin will come after you next. Close the sky, and on Earth we will handle it ourselves. So she's basically saying, you take care of the skies and my people can take care of the land. She might be right, maybe, but I've been hearing a lot of analysts and stuff talking about, well, technically the Ukrainian Air Force still hasn't been destroyed. Like, they haven't really lost that many aircraft, which means why do they need more if they've got plenty already? That was the argument, the counter argument. Anyway, let's move on. Okay, so 5:01 p.m. These are all my local Central Standard Time now because this is what was popping into my feed as I was driving home from work. Starbucks, Coca-Cola, and Amazon have joined the growing list of companies imposing their own punishments on Russia over Vladimir Putin's war on Ukraine. In a statement on the website Monday, Coca-Cola announced it was suspending its business with Russia, saying, now this is all PR shit. You've probably heard me say this every day so far. Our hearts are with the people who are enduring unconscionable effects from these tragic events in Ukraine.
Have some thoughts and prayers, and here are some helmets.
Yes, and the beverage giant said, we will continue to monitor and assess the situation as circumstances evolve. You make soft drinks. You can monitor and assess all you want. What are you going to do? They need drinks. Let's get them in there. I don't think that's really helpful. I'm sorry. Not unless you're making Jolt with about a kilo of cocaine per 2 liter. Then maybe that would have a pretty good effect. Be like the
Or
ultimate
surge.
Shaka Cola, right?
I prefer search.
Yeah. All right. So, about 30 minutes later, there was an announcement that the U.S. is sending 2 Patriot missile batteries, nice, to Poland at the request of the Polish government in a move designed to bolster the country's defense amid ongoing tensions with Russia. At the direction of the Secretary of Defense and at the invitation of our Polish allies, General Walters, commander of the the U.S. European Command, has directed U.S. Army Europe and Africa to reposition 2 Patriot batteries to Poland. European Command spokesman Scott, this is going to be a funny name, Scott Girinelli, I think that's Girinelli, said Tuesday. Send it in Pepsi, man. This defense deployment is being conducted proactively to counter any potential threat to U.S. and allied forces and NATO territory. Oh, I forgot to give you the picture. I'm sorry. Bing. That was just basically Fox News at the Pentagon sharing that tweet saying that was the confirmation that it was happening. Because they have a guy sitting there, and basically anything that comes down the wire, they tweet it, and then the news broadcasts it. So, 5:38. Okay, 6:02. So I'm home now, and I'm sipping on Sapporo Reserves tonight. I'm all out. Don't ask. The leaders of both Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates repeatedly declined overtures from the White House to set up a call with President Biden, according to the reporting from the Wall Street Journal. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and the UAE's Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan have declined to speak with President Biden. But both world leaders repeatedly fielded calls from Russian President Vladimir Putin. There was some expectation of a phone call, but it never happened, said a U.S. official of the planned discussion between the Saudi prince and President Biden. It was part of turning on the spigot of Saudi oil. Now, let me just paraphrase what I just read. We were going to have Captain Sundown beg OPEC for oil. A nation that was once energy independent was going to beg the fundraisers of terrorism to pump more oil. They wouldn't even answer the phone. But they would answer the phone, and they did because they have monitored calls for the last week between Saudi Arabia and Russia. Putin. It's nice to know who your friends are. Not that we ever considered any of those pricks our friends. Remember this. Remember this moment when we unfuck our energy policy. Because it's coming. The American people are not going to tolerate this for much longer. There's no way.
You'd be surprised what the American people will tolerate. Just like the
Somebody
British
once told me that the American people have a very pliable asshole. And that's, I think, what that means is what you're saying. How much
Just
can
look
they
at the
take?
Great Depression,
Well, no, but still, the fact of the matter is this country's being bled dry at the pump, which is ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
All right, moving along. About a minute later. This is the story that pissed me off, and you can tell because it's long. Here's a picture for you. Poland offered to give its entire fleet of MiG-29 fighter jets to the U.S. in exchange for a chance to buy American F-16s as part of a deal to bolster the Ukrainian Air Force while upgrading the Poles with NATO aircraft. The authorities of the Republic of Poland, after consultations between the President and the government, are ready to deploy immediately and free of charge all their MiG-29 jets and send them to Ramstein Air Force Base and place them at the disposal of the government of the United States of America. That came from the Polish Foreign Ministry. At the same time, Poland requests the United States provide us with used aircraft with corresponding operational capabilities. Poland is ready to immediately establish these conditions of purchase of the planes. See, they're going to buy them. The Poles also requested any other NATO member countries that have their MiGs of their own to take similar action. Those may include Bulgaria and Slovakia. Ukrainian defense officials for days have been asking for help with supplies ranging from helmets, have some helmets, to ammunition and fighter jets, a request that Poland appeared ready to fulfill almost 2 weeks into Russia's invasion of its smaller neighbor. Undersecretary of State Victoria Nuland said that during a State Foreign Relations Committee hearing Tuesday that the announcement was, quote, a surprise move by the Poles. To my knowledge, it wasn't pre-consulted with us that they planned to give those planes to us, she had said. But as you know, we have been having consultations with them for a couple of days now about this request from the Ukrainians to receive their aircraft, and were they ready to donate them, whether we would be able to support backfill, there's that word again, in their own security needs. Earlier Tuesday, a bipartisan group of U.S. lawmakers sent a letter to President Biden urging him to support the deal with Poland. But this guy's the most useless piece of shit in the Pentagon. Press Secretary John Kirby distanced.
Pentagon have rooms full of those people.
Fuck that guy. He distanced the U.S. from the proposal later in the day, saying that while the decision to hand over the jets to Ukraine is in the hands of the Polish government, American involvement raises serious concerns for the entire NATO alliance. It is simply not clear to us that there is substantive rationale for it, he says. We will continue to consult with Poland and our NATO allies about the issue and the difficult logistic challenges it presents, but we do not believe Poland's proposal is a tenable one. Sorry, I'm trying to read ahead. This motherfucker here.
Mm-hmm.
So I got the answer to how many MiG-28s they have, or 29s they have. Poland has 28 of them. And
That's
it plans...
still a big number for Poland.
It's a fair number, because they also use Su-26s.
Mm-hmm.
Those are more like fighter bombers.
Right.
SU-25s.
or 25. Sorry. Yeah, George said that too.
But
So
those are the
anyway,
I mean,
according to the CIA's World Factbook, Ukraine has had a broad defense industry capable of maintaining and upgrading Soviet combat aircraft. Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki, sorry, I'm not very good at pronouncing Polish names, told reporters in London earlier Tuesday that despite the decision, neither Poland or NATO are parties to the war in Ukraine. Russia, meanwhile, has warned that it will view support of Ukraine's air force as an escalation of the conflict, that it may retaliate. I'm sorry, you fuckers have the armies of 4 countries working for you. I don't care what you think. Russia, meanwhile, oh wait, I already said that. The United Kingdom, which is an advanced air force of its own, said that it would also support Poland's move as war rages in Eastern Europe. Now, I did some digging, and I asked a few questions, and I called my congressman, because he used to be my county judge, and he's the guy who signed my CNR license. And I drank with him. Used to. Now he's in Washington. So, I've got a drinking buddy who's a congressman. Anyway, I asked him a question about this, and I said, "What do you think?" And he goes, "Well, it's pretty clear cut to me." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he says, "Well, we can't have the Poles take the MiG straight to the Ukraine, because then Polish people enter Ukraine and now they're agitators." And I said, "Okay." And he goes, "And we can't have Ukrainian Air Force pilots walk across the border into Poland because that's too obvious." And I thought, okay. And I'm like, explain it to me as if I was a macaroni and cheese eating mungo watching CNN. And he kind of laughed. And he goes, okay, they're going to take these planes and they're going to leave them on an airfield in Germany. And they're basically going to do the equivalent of leaving the car unlocked with the keys in the ignition, and they're just going to turn their backs and look away. And if the planes just happen to fly off in the direction of Ukraine, they'll just look at each other and shrug their shoulders and go, "Oh well, we didn't really want those anyway." That's pretty much what the plan is. That made sense to me. Like, at first I couldn't understand the Rammstein thing. When he explained it to me like that, I'm like, I like it. It makes sense. I'm cool with that. And I'm like, so then why is John Kirby such a dick? And he goes, well, because the guy is a dick and he's just a mouthpiece. He's just a pretty face. I'm like, he's not even a pretty face.
I've seen
Anyway.
prettier faces.
Yeah, well, you know. I mean, I guess if you had to stand him next to Jen Psaki.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think I'd take my chances with Jen Psaki.
I think I would take my chances with just diving headfirst into a wood chipper.
Well,
Anyway,
you didn't
let's
say the
move
wood
on.
chipper was available.
Yeah, well, with me, a wood
See?
chipper is always available.
Well, I didn't know this, so you know,
I know.
you
All right.
put me in a spot.
We're almost done, guys. We got
All right,
2 stories
keep
left.
going, keep
Two
going.
stories left. I only got 1 picture left, so. And it's actually a picture I think Scott sent me, which is pretty funny. And it doesn't even have anything to do with the person involved in the story, but the situation is the same. So you're going to love this. Bing! 6:47 p.m. The New York Times announced on Tuesday that it will temporarily pull its reporters out of Russia after President Vladimir Putin effectively banned dissenting information about his invasion of Ukraine. Putin signed a new bill on Friday imposing prison sentences of up to 15 years for those spreading information that goes against the Russian government's narrative of the war. Under the new legislation, the Times writes, journalists who use the term war to describe could be sentenced to prison. I don't know why that sounds so weird. Russia's new legislation seeks to criminalize independent, accurate news reporting about the war against Ukraine. For the safety and security of our editorial staff working in the region, we're moving them out of the country for now. Now, I know the picture I said or put up there is CNN, but the situation is still kind of the same joke. You know, you sign the law for fake news, and all of a sudden the news agencies are leaving. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
we should try that here. All right, you guys have made it this far. I got one more story. I got 15 seconds before it's 2 hours, so we're gonna go over 2 hours.
Oh no, Sean.
No,
You
this is a
can't
quick
do
one. This was more like a foreshadowing hit piece, I think. But it was a story that started off. She was born in the Soviet Union and emigrated to the United States at the age of 30. 9 years later, in 1999, she became an American citizen. Then, more than a decade later, the Department of Justice has alleged that she became a spy on behalf of Vladimir Putin and Russia. Elena Branson is 61 years old and is accused of flouting the Foreign Agent Registration Act, or FARA, and failing to properly inform the U.S. government that she was working on behalf of the Kremlin. Now, I'm sorry, but if you're a spy, of course you're not going to say, I'm a spy, right?
That's
She
why she's
faces
gotta
charges of conspiring to act as an agent of a foreign
get
government without notifying the Attorney General. Acting as an agent of a foreign government without notifying the Attorney General, conspiring to evade FARA registration, willfully failing to register under FARA, conspiring to commit visa fraud, and lying to the FBI. If convicted on all accounts, she could face a maximum of 35 years in prison. However, she's been on the run in Russia for the last, 3 months. Now, here's a question. Do you all remember when we actually used to kill spies? Execute spies?
Yeah.
The
Sean,
Rosenbergs?
do you remember when we used to execute people for treason against the United States?
Yes, but I told you that years ago. Yes,
Mhm.
the standard punishment for treason, hanging. Alternative, firing squad. Guess what we do to spies? Same thing. Actually, we don't anymore. Because apparently this country can't stomach the idea
Actually,
of capital
actually,
punishment.
firing squads are coming back. They are making
Yeah,
a comeback.
that is true. That is true.
Only because they can't get any of that chemical to inject
Good.
people.
I mean, listen, I've said this before and I will bang this drum forever. If America ever needs another John C. Woods, I will be the first to volunteer. Just saying. And he wasn't firing squad, he was hangman. Like, if
Oh.
I will volunteer for that job. I can sleep like a dead body every night after doing my duty. I'm sorry. Like, I can just turn my brain off. It's not a big deal to me. It's just a job. Anyway, now that you know that I'm obviously sadistic, I'm gonna go ahead and
Done that.
huh? Well, yeah, it's because
I've always done.
I've known
I've
you forever. And
we've known
HVS is
each other
here.
forever.
Well, HVS is here. He just got here in time for me to play this. And we did make it to 2 hours, so I'm sorry for that. But I'm glad you all came along, my panelists, my viewers, and everybody who participated in a very active chat today. So I am grateful. If you're new to my channel, welcome. If you're a regular here, welcome back. Maybe hit like, maybe subscribe, maybe tell somebody else that I'm doing this. Also, if you want to be a part of my server, or if you think you can contribute to this show, I have a channel on the Discord. You're more than welcome to join it, and you can put in stories there, and if I can corroborate it, I'll put it on the show. If you want to be on the show, I can put you on the show too. Anyway, guys, this was the War Room, Day 13, and we'll see you tomorrow for what will obviously be 2 weeks of absolute hell for Ukraine. Later.
Shall not be infringed.